Chapter 4. Simulations. One instance where programs, rooms, and doors are truly on display is in simulations. Simulations are scripts wherein a variety of programs and room conditions are used to serve a specific end. Here, the dreamer is submerged into a unique script where the dream is brought deeply into the interior. Using programs and directed conditions, the dreamer is brought to a new state of knowledge and experience dependent on the purpose of the simulation. The potential within simulation is myriad and endless. Some simulations run for only a few minutes and include a single program within one setting, whilst others can continue for years, spanning realms, and have a cast of hundreds of programs all working together. Simulations are an excellent setting to learn new skills or enhance the knowledge of the dreamer beyond his own horizons. Instructors are not limited to the knowledge of their dreamer, and they can be written specifically to impart any skill or knowledge that is required in that setting. Simulations are an immersion experience and not an exercise in rote learning. Within them, one learns by experiencing the skill or knowledge firsthand. For example, if one needs to learn the dynamics of energy and power, then he is taken through experiences of both and sees their effect on himself and on others. Thus, the fruit of instruction through simulation is direct and intimate. As the experience is not real, it is also not dependent on timelines. Simulations can traverse past events, characters, and settings, but they can also run scripts that show the future, taking present conditions and exploring them as they unfold in time. In such a setting, where anything is possible and nothing is real, there is also no better place to fail. Simulations provide the perfect arena to play out scenarios until the wheels fall off, especially those that you cannot afford to run to failure externally in your waking life. Instead, such a thing can be done internally, with programs, and much can be learned without the subsequent consequences of failure. Many conditions can be laboured on a dreamer in a simulation that otherwise would not be possible. Whether the subject can handle said conditions can be a valuable finding of the simulation. Even a single condition in a room can change that room dramatically. For instance, if the dreamer feels he is being watched, a small idea in principle, yet the resultant change in pressure and thus the change in perspective can be great. A condition like this may have no reality, yet the goddess can place it in every room of a simulation to effect a desired result, be it a change in behavior or trialing the dreamer for similar real conditions in the future. If the subject reacts negatively to a condition in a simulation, then something must be changed for him if he is to face the same condition in waking life. The same principle can apply to the convictions of a dreamer. He may strongly believe something to be true, but a simulation can take this conviction to its natural conclusion, striking it against the truth until one or the other relents. An intriguing avenue to simulate is the relationship between dreamers. Reflections offer a window into the soul of others in a way that would not otherwise be accessible. In Simule, a dreamer can take reflections to places that they would never go to themselves, and learn things there that would not otherwise see the light of day. It must be remembered that there is no impetus for honest composition when reflections are written. That is, not everything that comes from a reflection will correlate with the dreamer in question. But they are built on the foundation of that being, and therefore to experiment with them can be fruitful. The forthcoming information may be so deep that the subject is not even consciously aware of it, or it may be a marker for a more generalized aspect of their character. It is very much like talking to a person in dream sleep. They are most likely, although not always, a reflection, a construction of that person by the dreamer, yet the content of the dream, a conversation perhaps, may have significant meaning. One example of this sort of simulated interaction is desiring something from someone and then seeing whether or not they will give it to you, yet without ever breaching the topic with the target. If they are partial to fulfilling the desire in simulation, then there is a high chance that they will do so in waking life and vice versa. The same can also be true for the dreamer himself. In simul, he can receive the fruits of his desires and reflect on them without the consequences that may be attached. It may be found that what was desired was not what the dreamer was seeking in the first place, a valuable conclusion in itself. Another scenario is harassment by censors. No one enjoys relentless self-criticism, but it must be admitted that in some instances, it is the only way to break undesirable character traits and habits. Censors in simulation are very efficient at this, and in this context, where the subject cannot avoid such programs until the simulation has run its course, they can take one to levels of individual reflection that can be very useful and reformative. Simulations run with particular features that ought to be noted. As I have mentioned, they begin and end fixedly. They are run for a purpose and always under the careful eye of the goddess. They do not end until their utility has been achieved. They are very internal and most often run at high to extreme energy levels. In such states, the mental flow is quickened. Doors fly open and slam behind rapidly. Internal time is expanded and compressed into short periods of clock time. Thus, a simulation lasting a day may feel threefold as long to the dreamer. When inside, you will also have your cell phone on. By this I mean that in the mind you will always hear and see what you need to know. This is actually the case even outside, but it is particularly true in simul. This means that if you need to hear a conversation or a comment, or to see an image or a marker, you will experience it without any special effort. If you need a bot to sit by you and talk with you for hours on end, he will have to do so, even if he doesn't want to, and he can become painfully aware of this fact. When a simulation reaches a large setting and becomes populated with many programs, the nature of the room will change. Dreamers are used to thinking in an internal monologue, essentially to themselves. This does not remain in such situations. Instead, the mental flow becomes the dialogue between the dreamer and the programs around him, or simply the words of whoever is speaking to the dreamer at the time. This can be quite disorienting. Fluid conversation becomes the train of thought of the subject, and it is necessary in those types of simulations. In this way, vast amounts of new information can be gained by merely listening, again with the cell phone always on. Simulations only work if the dreamer is convinced of the conditions of the simulation. That is, X is a real being and not a program, or that Y has really occurred and is not a trick. As soon as the illusion is broken, the simulation is no longer useful and the mother will shut it down. All programs and external conditions collude to keep the continuity of the simulation. One program will always support another in its designs to keep the dreamer where he needs to be and knowing what he needs to know. Until the right time, the subject will also not be allowed access to external information that breaks the illusion of the simulation. In truth, simulations are not unlike the everyday lives of sleepers. Most who are not lucid go to places and interact with only programs, yet they do not know it. They learn from instructors, they are criticized by censors, and they have acquaintanceships with bots. Yet their simulations are all external and are simply to a pedestrian end.